The Legend of Jigong, Chapter 27.
Our story opens with Guotai and his wife, Lu Shi, and their living situation is grim. They're living in the abandoned, run-down rooms of a city god temple on Qingguang Mountain.
Yeah, they're essentially squatting in a religious space because they've been entirely chewed up and spat out by the secular world.
Right, and we really need to pause and examine the social architecture of the Song dynasty to understand why this specific living arrangement is so psychologically devastating for him.
Yeah, because Gao is a scholar. And in this society, the label of scholar isn't just a nod to someone who, reads a lot of books.
It's not just a hobby.
No, it is the absolute pinnacle of cultural expectation.
Because this is an era defined by the imperial examination system, right?
Precisely. Passing those exams was practically the only avenue for upward social mobility.
So everything hinged on it.
Everything. The entire social fabric was built around the idea that a man studies the Confucian classics, passes these grueling bureaucratic exams, secures a government post, and thereby elevates his entire family.
His ancestors, his descendants, everyone.
Exactly. So to be a scholar who has failed to secure that position and to be reduced to living in a temple, relying on the charity of a religious institution, it isn't just a run-of-the-mill financial slump.
It's an erasure of his identity.
It's a profound existential erasure. He has failed his fundamental purpose in the social hierarchy.
Which means every single day he wakes up in that temple, he is staring at the physical manifestation of his own failure.
Every single day.
And the text gives us this incredibly specific, agonizing catalyst for his breaking point. It's evening, right? Gao tells his wife that he needs to go out the next day to visit friends.
Which is likely him just trying to network or keep up the illusion that he is still part of the scholar class.
Right, trying to save face. And Lu Shi, his wife, responds by saying, "If you're going out tomorrow, I have 200 cash. These are basic copper coins that my aunt gave me to buy needlework."
A tiny, tiny amount of money.
Yeah, she says, take it so you can buy some tea and snacks.
The mechanism of that interaction is just devastating.
It really is.
I mean, she has been given this microscopic amount of money by a relative, explicitly so she can buy needlework materials. This implies she might be trying to make small items to sell, or at the very least trying to mend their inevitably tattered clothing.
It's a fragile little lifeline for their household.
Exactly. Yet, without a second of hesitation, she offers it to her husband. Why? So he doesn't have to suffer the indignity of not being able to afford a simple cup of tea when he's out trying to maintain the facade of a respectable gentleman?
And his reaction is where I really see the timeless nature of this text. When she offers him those 200 copper coins, he doesn't explode in anger.
He doesn't yell.
He doesn't break down sobbing either. The text simply notes that he contained a look of shame. He takes the coins, tells her to go to sleep, and then he just sits under the oil lamp.
Just dazed.
Yeah, staring blankly at the wall, sighing at the sky.
It is the quiet paralysis of a man whose worldview has just collapsed in on itself.
I think anyone who has ever experienced deep financial shame can map onto this perfectly. A small, incredibly kind, selfless gesture from your partner can suddenly violently magnify your own feelings of inadequacy.
It really shines a blinding spotlight on exactly how much you're failing to hold up your end of the partnership.
But reading this, I found myself debating his ultimate motivation. How does the gift of 200 copper coins trigger a man to sneak out at dawn and abandon his wife forever?
It's drastic escalation.
Very. I mean, is his departure a twisted act of love, where he genuinely believes she's better off without him dragging her down into starvation? Or is this purely destructive, fragile male pride?
What's fascinating here is that I would argue the text refuses to untangle those two motivations.
Because they're the same thing to him.
Exactly. In his mind, they are the exact same thing.
Yep.
His pride is utterly shattered precisely because he cannot fulfill what he perceives as his loving masculine duty to provide. In a deeply patriarchal society where a man's worth is entirely predicated on his ability to be the breadwinner and the social shield for his family, his failure to do so isn't just a practical inconvenience.
It's a moral failure.
It is a moral infection. When she hands him those 200 coins, she is acting out of pure, unconditional love. But he receives that gesture as a mirror, reflecting his own impotence.
Yeah. The shame is so toxic that it mutates into this dark, inescapable logic of like, if I cannot be the provider, I have no right to occupy the space of the husband.
It's a complete short circuit of his self-worth.
He's deciding that his presence is actively harming her, so she falls asleep completely unaware of the crisis she accidentally triggered, and he stays up.
This is where he writes those letters.
Right, the 3 poems of despair. He leaves them pressed under an inkstone, and right at dawn, he sneaks out. He finds the 60-year-old temple worker, a man named Feng Xun, who's sweeping the courtyard.
The poor guy is just doing his job.
Yeah, and Gao just asks him to unbar the gate, and he walks out of the temple, stepping out of his wife's life forever.
We should really analyze those 3 poems because they're essentially a topographical map of his psychological collapse.
They're brutal to read.
They don't just express sadness, they show us the specific stages of his descent into total hopelessness.
Let's break them down. Poem 1 sets the scene. It reads, "When times are bad and luck is poor, it is hard to pass the days. Full of shame, with no other choice, we live in a nunnery. Although the Buddhist door has feelings of kinship, we are instead treated as a joke by outsiders."
Notice the friction there between the sacred interior and the secular exterior.
Yeah, the inside versus outside.
Right. Inside the temple walls, they are safe. The nuns are compassionate. The Buddhist door offers genuine shelter and kinship.
But Gao is entirely incapable of accepting that grace.
Exactly, because his psychological gaze is hyper-fixated on the outside world. He cannot find peace in the sanctuary because he's consumed by the perceived judgment of the secular society looking in at him.
He feels like a punchline.
Yes. He feels that relying on religious charity turns his marriage, his education, and his very existence into a joke. The physical stone walls of the temple cannot protect him from the phantom weight of societal judgment.
That completely recontextualizes his suffering. He's not dying of exposure, he's dying of embarrassment.
Precisely.
He's safe physically, but completely exposed emotionally. Then we move to poem 2. It reads, "Leaving for another town with little chance of return, survival or death is unknown even to myself. Generally in this life, it's hard to reunite. If there is destiny, we will be husband and wife in the next life."
So if the first poem was an assessment of the situation, the second poem is the execution of his escape.
The finality of it.
And the defining characteristic here is absolute fatalism. Survival or death is unknown even to myself. He isn't leaving with a grand plan to reinvent himself.
He's not going out to get a job and come back rich.
No, he isn't venturing out to strike it rich and return on a white horse. He is willfully walking into a void. By stating that his survival is unknown, he is relinquishing all human agency. He is surrendering himself to the random chaos of the universe.
Pushing the only sliver of hope, the chance of reuniting with his wife, entirely out of the mortal realm and into reincarnation.
He's effectively burying their marriage in this life.
And the emotional violence of that peaks in poem 3. "This is the ultimate surrender," he writes. "Leaving this letter, my pen drops with hidden sorrow. I hate my own incompetence and even more my difficulties. I send this for my worthy wife to carefully comprehend and trust your body to another to paint your moth eyebrows."
That final line, "find another to paint your moth eyebrows," carries so much cultural and emotional weight.
What does that mean exactly in this context?
Well, moth eyebrows is a deeply entrenched poetic motif in Chinese literature. It refers to the beautifully painted, delicate eyebrows of a woman, which served as a symbol of feminine beauty, but more importantly, of marital intimacy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there are famous historical anecdotes of devoted husbands lovingly painting their wives' eyebrows in the morning.
Oh, wow. So it's a very intimate act.
Very. So by explicitly commanding her to find someone else to perform this act, Gao is officially relinquishing his title. He isn't just saying goodbye, he is legally and spiritually severing the marital bond.
He hates his incompetence so much that he is actively firing himself from the role of husband.
That's a good way to put it.
He hates that he can't be the one to provide for her, to buy her needlework, to paint those moth eyebrows. He is declaring himself socially dead to her before he ever physically walks off the mountain.
Exactly. The man who walks past the temple worker at dawn is, in his own internal narrative, already a ghost.
Man, that's heavy. So daylight breaks, Lucy wakes up and finds her husband gone. She searches the grounds, talks to the old temple worker Feng Shun, who casually mentions Gao left early.
And then she goes back to the room.
Right, she goes back, lifts the inkstone, and reads the 3 poems. And her reaction is visceral. She doesn't just cry. The text describes her weeping aloud, her insides feeling completely torn apart.
I mean, she is stranded, she is broke, she is living in a temple, and she has just been instructed by the man she loves to go find another husband.
It is absolute devastation.
This is the narrative rock bottom. The text strips away every single worldly comfort and safety net this woman has.
And it's precisely in this vacuum of complete human helplessness that the author introduces the mechanism of salvation, isn't it?
Yes, because into this scene of utter despair walks an old nun named King Zen, offering the only lifeline left in a world that has failed them, divine intervention.
Right. King Zen assesses the situation and says, "Don't panic. I have a solution." At the Lingyin Temple by the West Lake, there is a monk named Jigong. He is a living Buddha in this world.
She builds him up as this omnipotent figure.
Totally. She says he can pinch his fingers and calculate the threads of fate. He knows the past and the future. We will send the temple worker, Feng Shun, to get him. Jigong can divine exactly where your husband went, and we can send people to drag him back.
This sets up a very specific expectation for both Lu Shi and the listener.
Yeah,
right.
A magical fix.
You have an overwhelming, insurmountable problem. You identify the magical, omnipotent solution. The standard architectural rules of a fairy tale dictate that the magical solution will now immediately descend from the heavens, bathe the room in golden light, and fix everything.
But this narrative actively refuses to play by those rules.
Refuses completely.
Because what happens next isn't a glorious divine rescue. It is a mind-numbing bureaucratic nightmare.
It's so frustrating to read.
The hurdle of actually trying to get a hold of a living Buddha is hilarious and deeply frustrating. Feng Shun, the 60-year-old temple worker, is dispatched to fetch Jigong, and we get this incredible escalating sequence of failed attempts.
Which completely undercuts the majesty of the divine.
Yeah, so the first time Feng Shun hikes all the way over to the Lingyin Temple, he asks for the living Buddha, and the monks essentially tell him he's not here.
The omnipotent savior is simply out for the day.
Right, like he ran to the grocery store. So Feng Shun hikes back, waits, and tries again. Attempt number 2. He gets to the temple, and the entire complex is surrounded by armed soldiers.
The military is completely cordoned off the area.
Yeah.
This is where the chaotic political reality of the Song dynasty bleeds into the supernatural narrative. The sacred, divine space of the temple is not immune to the world. It is actively being overridden by the secular, militaristic power of the state.
And it escalates from there. Attempt number 3. Feng Shun finally manages to bypass the crowds, asks around, and discovers the unthinkable. Jigong has been locked up by Prime Minister Qin.
He's in jail.
The literal living Buddha, the man who controls the threads of fate, has been arrested by a human politician.
It's absurd.
And because of all this running around, a massive delay occurs. The text explicitly notes that this back and forth takes 3 to 4 days.
Which satirizes the entire concept of orderly divine intervention.
Yeah.
I mean, Jigong is a miracle worker, yes, but he exists entirely within a deeply flawed, politically corrupt human society. He is subject to the whims of irritable officials, military blockades, and general unreliability. It aggressively grounds the supernatural in the mundane.
But see, I have to challenge this narrative choice, though, because it seems to actively ruin the stakes of the story.
How do you mean?
Well, you have a life-or-death emergency. Guotai is out there starving or preparing to throw himself off a cliff. His wife has been in an agonizing state of panic for nearly a week.
Right.
You go to a literal deity for a miracle, and you find out he's sitting in a jail cell. How does the author expect the reader to fear for Gao's life while simultaneously laughing at a god who can't even outsmart a mortal prime minister? Doesn't it undermine the tragedy we just spent so much time building?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I think that friction is exactly the author's intent.
Really?
Yeah. The text is forcing you to accept that the universe does not care about your personal timeline.
Oh, that's interesting.
We expect the divine to operate like a flawless emergency room, responding immediately to the most severe traumas. But the author is suggesting that if divine forces actually operate within our messy world, they must inevitably get tangled up in that mess.
So the stakes are real, but the response is messy.
The stakes for Guotai remain terrifyingly real, but the machinery of his rescue is laughably mundane. When you pray for a miracle, you have to accept that the miracle might need to make bail before it can get to you.
Sorry, your husband is missing. The Buddha is currently detained for questioning. It's maddening.
It really is.
So finally, after this excruciating multi-day delay, Feng Shun is hiking down the mountain yet again, exhausted, and he just happens to bump into Jigong.
Just bumps into him.
And Jigong isn't descending on a radiant lotus flower. He's just casually strolling up the mountain path, completely unbothered, accompanied by 2 immensely wealthy patrons, a man named Zhao Wenhui and another named Sube Shan.
This arrival is brilliant. Lu Shi has been drowning in panic for 4 days, but Jigong arrives exactly when he means to, displaying a profound lack of urgency.
He's just chilling.
Furthermore, he arrives flanked by the machinery of secular power, specifically the machinery of immense wealth. These rich benefactors are not background characters. They are the practical, financial tools the divine is about to utilize to solve a human problem.
The visual is so striking. Feng Shun, sweating and panting, runs up to him screaming, "Master, I've been looking for you everywhere. It's a life or death emergency. Why are you just leisurely walking around today?"
And Jigong just waves him off.
Yeah, he says, "Oh, I'm just heading up to the nunnery. We're dropping someone off to become a nun. What's the rush?" It's just another Tuesday afternoon for him.
His total immunity to mortal panic is what solidifies his divine status. He exists above the frantic frequency of human anxiety, even as he actively participates in it.
So Feng Shun dumps the entire tragic story of the suicide notes and the missing husband onto Jigong and the two wealthy patrons, and they all hurry into the nunnery's courtyard.
Right.
And this brings us to what I find to be the most psychologically rich moment in the entire source material. It's the collision between the reality of poverty and the performance of art.
Yes, the scene in the West Courtyard. The text describes this space as very clean, very serene, with Buddhist scriptures neatly stacked on the tables. It's an environment designed for contemplation.
But that's not what the rich guys look at.
Exactly. What immediately captures the attention of these two wealthy visitors isn't the religious text, it's the writing on the wall.
Right. They step into the North Room, and dominating the center of the wall is a massive piece of calligraphy, flanked by an elegant couplet. And the signature at the bottom reveals it was written by Guotai.
Which is huge.
Now, we just spent a massive amount of time dissecting Guotai's suicide notes, which were saturated with self-loathing, the agonizing shame of a 200 cash deficit, and absolute despair over his inability to succeed in the brutal economic reality of the world.
So we have to keep that intense, bleeding vulnerability in the forefront of our minds as we examine the face he chose to present to the public.
Here is the poem Gao painted on the wall for everyone to see. "I only love a quiet, secluded place, far from worldly customs, building a small thatched hut against the mountain, half a mew of a square pond, a mirror of water, a few willow trees, several rows of bamboo. When the spring wine is warm, I keep guests to get drunk. Where the night lamp is red, I read my books, discarding the locks of wealth and the reins of fame, a piece of ice in a jade vase."
The psychological whiplash is staggering.
It's completely opposite to the suicide notes.
Exactly. The private, desperate man writes, "I hate my own incompetence. I'm a joke. I wish I was dead because I can't afford a cup of tea."
Yeah.
But the public, performative man writes, "I am a pure, enlightened scholar who has willingly discarded the reins of fame. I don't care about money. I am as flawless and untroubled as a piece of ice in a jade vase."
So what does this all mean? Reading this, I posited a theory. Is this poem just armor he wears to protect his pride from the rich guys visiting the temple, or is it a deep protective delusion?
That's the core question.
Is he lying to the public, or is he desperately trying to lie to himself to survive the humiliation of his reality? It reminds me of someone posting a perfectly curated, sun-drenched photo to their Instagram feed, claiming they are living their best life exactly 10 minutes after writing a devastatingly depressed entry in their private journal.
That analogy eliminates the mechanism perfectly. It is the ancient equivalent of curated digital perfection.
A filter for his life.
Exactly. Guotai is intimately aware of what a respectable, worthy scholar is supposed to sound like in this society.
And it's not broke and depressed.
No, a truly great scholar isn't supposed to care about base things like copper coins and rent. He is supposed to care about willow trees, bamboo, and moral purity. The wall poem is his armor, yes, but it's also a necessary performance.
He's acting the part.
He is actively playing the role of the aloof, unbothered intellectual, trying to manifest that reality while internally bleeding out from the toxic shame of his actual poverty.
And the darkest, most tragic irony of this entire sequence is that his fake persona actually works.
It works perfectly.
Subeshan, the incredibly wealthy patron staring at the wall, is completely mesmerized by the illusion. He reads this poem and declares, "What an elegantly talented scholar! Look at the strength of this handwriting. Look at the nobility of these sentiments." And right then and there, based purely on this curated performance of fake contentment, Subeshan promises to fund Gao's imperial exams and open a prestigious school for him.
This reveals a profound and rather cynical mechanism regarding how patronage functioned back then. In this world, wealth is only bestowed upon those who can successfully perform the illusion that they don't actually need it.
Oh, that's so messed up.
The brutal, ugly, desperate poverty of Gao's 3 suicide notes would not have inspired Subeshan to open his wallet. It would have repulsed him.
He would have looked the other way.
Wealthy elites want to sponsor a pristine genius who claims to be above the mundane world. They are buying proximity to his idealized moral purity.
Wow.
So Gao literally secures the exact financial rescue he was dying for, based entirely on a poem where he explicitly lies about not wanting it.
But that protective delusion and the promise of future patronage shatters the moment you introduce a ticking clock. Because a prestigious school doesn't mean anything if the headmaster is dead in a ditch.
Exactly. The mundane world has offered its financial solution, but now they desperately need the divine world to execute the physical rescue.
Right. So the old nun and Gao's frantic wife, Lu Shi, rush into the room, bowing repeatedly and begging Jigong to tell them where Gao is.
And this is where things get really intense.
Jigong drops his playful demeanor. The text says he presses his spiritual light and claps his hands 3 times. He performs the divine calculation, and then he delivers arguably the most terrifying line in the entire text. He simply says, "Ah, finished, finished."
The tone shifts from a sophisticated literary critique straight into a visceral panic attack.
Lu Shi is terrified. She's begging him to explain. Jigong turns to the temple worker and asks for the exact time. Feng Shen says it is noon, and Jigong lays out the grim mathematical reality.
The ticking clock.
Guotai is currently 180 liters away. Ali is roughly a third of a mile, so we are talking about a distance of about 60 miles. And Jigong states that by sunset, Gao will face an unavoidable, fatal disaster.
The narrative stakes are suddenly astronomical. It is noon. They have perhaps 6 hours of daylight left to cover 60 miles on foot.
Which is crazy.
In the context of the Song dynasty, relying on walking or even a horse-drawn cart over rough terrain, that is mathematically impossible. The mundane world, the wealthy patrons, their promises of schools is completely useless in the face of this timeline.
And what's brilliant is how the text immediately mobilizes a hybrid rescue effort, blending the mundane economy with magical transit. Subashan, the rich patron who just fell in love with the wall poem, pleads with the monk.
Master, please be merciful.
If you can somehow bring him back alive, I swear I will set up the school for him. And Jigong pragmatically replies, fine. Send your strongest servant with me and bring 200 taels of silver for travel expenses.
Now look closely at the numbers the author is playing with here.
The 200.
Yes. Gao Guotai was driven to the brink of suicide because of the insurmountable psychological weight of 200 copper cash. Now, a wealthy patron casually produces 200 taels of silver, an exponentially larger, life-altering fortune, just to cover travel incidentals for a rescue mission.
It's a staggering disparity, and the author twists the knife by including a side detail right here. The other rich patron, Zhao Wenwei, sees the old nun and casually hands her another 200 taels of silver so that the woman they escorted up the mountain can officially become a nun.
Boom. 200 taels over here, 200 taels over there.
Exactly. The financial deficits that literally destroy the lives of the poor are nothing more than pocket change to these men.
It's so casual for them.
But even with pockets full of silver, that money can't bend time. They still have to cover an impossible 60 miles in half a day.
Which means the only remaining transit option is magic. But as we are about to see, Jigong's brand of magic is not the elegant, glowing teleportation you might expect from a living Buddha.
Not at all.
It is deeply physical, highly erratic, and utterly terrifying for any mortal caught in its wake.
So the rescue party is formed. You have Jigong, the wealthy patron servant Sulu carrying the silver, and the old temple worker Feng Shen. They head down the mountain, knowing they have to clear 180 light before the sun drops. And what does Jigong do? He starts doing a comedy routine.
Of course he does.
He stops on the path and says, all right, men, here's the strategy. We'll take 1 step forward and 3 steps back.
It's a complete refusal to honor the panic of the situation. Sulu, the servant, is a practical man holding a heavy bag of silver, and he is understandably losing his mind.
Right.
He points out the basic physics of the situation. Master, if we walk backward more than we walk forward, we won't even cover 8 li before dark, let alone 180. He is looking at this eccentric monk and realizing they are doomed.
And Jigong just smiles and says, oh, you don't like that method. Okay, new plan. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
He's trolling them.
He is. Feng Shen, who has dealt with Jigong before, starts laughing, realizing the monk is just messing with the new guy. Jigong suddenly gets serious, looks at them and asks, can you two keep up? They nod yes. And then Jigong just takes off. The text says he ran forward, and in a blink of an eye, he disappeared.
He literally leaves them in the dust. The author is highlighting the vast physical gulf between the mortal and the divine. The mortal men have to physically exert themselves, to sweat and suffer, just to engage with the starting line of a divine miracle.
They sprint after him. They only make it about 2 or 3 lies down the road, and they are already drenched in sweat, panting, completely exhausted. They decide they need to rest in a dense forest up ahead.
And when they stumble into the clearing,
Jigong is already there, lounging on the grass. He looks up and says, "What took you so long? I've already taken 2 naps."
for the mortals, attempting to force a miracle requires agonizing physical labor. For the living Buddha, transcending space and time is so effortless, it's actually boring. He is literally sleeping, while the mortal world sweats to keep up.
But they can't rest because the sun is moving. Jigong looks at their exhausted legs and asks a very strange question. Are those legs yours?
Sulu is so confused by this.
Yes. They're attached to our bodies. Whose else would they be? And Jigong says, well, they might belong to you, but when I chant a mantra, they walk on their own. He tells them to stand completely still, and he begins to chant. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Chihe.
This is a fascinating use of religious iconography.
How so?
He is reciting a legitimate, highly sacred Buddhist mantra, the 6-syllable mantra of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. But he isn't using it to impart spiritual enlightenment. He is weaponizing it to trigger a completely chaotic physical effect.
He is inducing a highly localized loss of bodily autonomy. Here's where it gets really interesting. I kept trying to find a way to describe this magic to a modern listener. It's not like they suddenly possess super speed like they're driving a fast sports car.
No, it's not controlled.
It's more like they have suddenly been caught in the gravitational pull of a massive invisible planet. They're being dragged forward by an overwhelming force, and they have absolutely zero control over their own limbs.
The text says their bodies could not be controlled by themselves. Their 2 legs ran like flying.
They are sprinting at terrifying superhuman speeds, completely unable to hit the brakes.
And this is where the slapstick physical comedy serves a vital structural purpose. Sulu is screaming at the top of his lungs, "Bastard, this is terrible. There's a dense forest of trees ahead. If we can't steer, we're going to smash into them and die."
He's freaking out.
He is experiencing the sheer, unadulterated terror of having his fragile mortal body subjected to divine velocity.
And Jigong is just casually gliding along next to them, saying, "Relax, I'm right here. You won't hit a thing." And sure enough, they barrel straight into the forest, fully expecting to be crushed, but their bodies magically phase right through the solid wood.
It's absurd.
We, the audience, know there is a man 60 miles away about to die a tragic death, but we are currently watching 2 grown men screaming in absolute terror as their magically possessed legs propel them through tree trunks.
That comedy acts as a pressure release valve. The tension of the ticking clock is incredibly high. The slapstick doesn't erase the tragedy of Gao's situation. Rather, it makes reading about it bearable.
He cuts the tension.
It reminds the reader that despite the grim reality of poverty and suicide, these characters are currently operating within the gravitational field of a divine trickster who plays by a much more amusing set of rules.
But the absurdity of this journey hasn't even peaked yet, because right in the middle of this high-speed, reality-bending, phasing through trees, sprint to save a dying scholar,
Oh boy, here we go.
the narrative violently swerves off the road to introduce a completely unrelated guy who is furious about his dumplings.
Ah, yes. The infamous dumpling vinegar incident.
It is the most jarring interruption.
This detour is entirely intentional, and it is where the moral architecture of the author's universe truly reveals itself.
Suddenly, the text drops us into a nearby village. We are introduced to a man named Wu Yun. He lives with his widowed mother, and the narrator explicitly brands him as an unfilial son.
Very important detail.
On this specific afternoon, his elderly mother has spent her time cooking him a hot meal of dumplings. But she made a mistake. She forgot to buy vinegar to serve with them.
To understand why this matters, we have to look at the foundational concept of filial piety in Chinese culture. Respecting, honoring, and caring for your parents, especially an aging widowed mother, is not just a nice thing to do.
It's basically law.
It is the supreme moral duty of a human being. It is the glue that holds society together. Therefore, Wu Yun's reaction to the missing vinegar is not just a childish temper tantrum, it is a profound, structural, moral failure.
Because he absolutely loses his mind over this missing condiment. He screams at his mother, "The older you get, the more confused you are. Who on earth eats dumplings without vinegar? You are truly useless."
It's awful.
His mother, intimidated and exhausted, doesn't say a single word back. Wu Yun grabs an empty bowl, storms out of his own house in a blind rage, and marches down the road to buy the vinegar himself.
The author is actively forcing you to compare these two domestic situations.
Oh, right, with Gao and Mu Shi.
Think about Lu Shi back at the temple. She gave her husband her very last 200 copper coins out of pure, selfless devotion, and he abandoned her out of a twisted sense of shame.
And then you have Wu Yun.
Here, Wu Yun's mother labors to cook him a meal, and he verbally abuses her and calls her useless over a side dish. The text is placing Gao's tragic, high-minded flaw right next to Wu Yun's petty, ugly entitlement.
You know, it's funny, reading about Wu Yun storming down the road with his empty bowl, fuming about his ruined lunch, I immediately thought of modern entitlement.
How so?
You see this exact dynamic today, like someone having a bad day and taking their stress out on an exhausted retail worker or family member over something incredibly trivial, like a slightly wrong coffee order.
Just to exert a tiny bit of control.
Exactly, and to feel superior. It's the exact same petty cruelty. So Wu Yun is marching down the road, vibrating with anger, and Jigong, who is currently leading a magical high-speed rescue sprint across the countryside, happens to spot him.
He sees the whole thing.
The text says Jigong had already calculated and understood. He points a single finger at the angry man and magically ropes Wu Yun into their supernatural marathon.
He essentially drafts a random, angry bystander into a terrifying, high-speed hostage situation simply because he noticed the guy was being a jerk to his mom.
Wu Yun suddenly finds his own legs betraying him, moving at light speed. He drops his bowl, waving his arms, screaming, "Where am I going? What is happening to me? My legs are going crazy."
So funny.
So now we have three mortal men screaming in terror, racing across the landscape like a runaway train, with an eccentric monk casually leading the pack.
The sensory details the author uses here are fantastic. The text notes that in the ears of the three people, they only heard the wind howling, as if riding the clouds.
Wow.
They have been completely disconnected from the physical earth. They are at the total mercy of momentum.
And the climax of this run is a spectacular crash. They approach a wide, bright, shining white river. Sulu, the servant holding the silver, panics again. He yells, "Master, don't let me run anymore. There's a massive river ahead. If I fall in, I'll drown with all this silver."
He's still worried about the money.
Jigong casually shouts back, "Just put in a little more effort and we'll cross." They literally fly over the surface of the water. The second their feet touch the opposite bank, Sulu decides he has had enough of divine magic.
He bails.
He spots a thick tree, and he physically throws his arms around the trunk to forcibly stop his own momentum. He crashes hard and collapses to the ground. Feng Shen tumbles and falls. The angry vinegar guy, Wu Yun, faceplants into the dirt.
The magical spell isn't gently lifted. It is broken by sheer physical exhaustion and the blunt force trauma of hugging a tree.
Now, I have to pause the narrative here because we need to interrogate the logic of this detour.
Okay, let's do it.
Why? Why would the author interrupt a dramatic, ticking clock rescue mission of a tragic, suicidal scholar just to punish some random villager who is complaining about dumpling condiments? It feels completely unhinged and counterproductive to the primary mission.
This raises an important question, but it seems counterproductive only if you view Jigong purely as a rescue service for the protagonist.
Right.
But he isn't. He is an agent of cosmic balance. He is instant karma made manifest. If you look at the Song Dynasty Buddhist framework the author is operating within, divine justice doesn't just activate for grand life or death tragedies, it constantly polices everyday morality.
I see.
Guotai is suffering because of an excess of pride and a misguided sense of duty. His flaw is inherently tragic and somewhat noble. Wu Yun is suffering from mundane, petty cruelty. His flaw is simply ugly.
So the divine intervention swoops in to save the noble sufferer, but it has absolutely zero tolerance for petty disrespect along the way.
None at all.
It literally drags the everyday sinner along for the ride, just to teach him a lesson.
Exactly. The narrative detour proves that the universe is always watching. Wu Yun's unfilial behavior was a disruption of the moral order, and Jigong's magic violently corrects it by subjecting him to a terrifying, exhausting, and completely disproportionate punishment.
It reminds the reader that karma doesn't just care about the big things.
Right, it cares how you treat your mother over lunch.
And the mathematical aftermath for Wu Yun is just brutally funny. Everyone is collapsed on the ground, groaning, unable to stand up. Jigong casually reaches into his robes and hands out a magic pill for them to eat so they can recover their muscle mobility.
Like giving out aspirin.
Sulu, rubbing his bruised ribs, flags down a passerby and asks where they are. The local guy says, "You are at Shalu village. You've passed Yuhong County by 20 li."
Let's do the math on that distance.
Let's do it.
Jigong originally stated that Guotai was exactly 180 leagues into Wei. The local just informed them they ran past Yuhong County by another 20 li, which means they ran 200 late.
In less than half a day.
Yeah.
And Wu Yun, lying in the dirt, is doing that exact same terrifying math. He realizes he is now 200 li, roughly 65 miles away from his kitchen. His empty vinegar bowl is smashed somewhere back in his village. He never even got to eat those dumplings.
And because the magic is worn off, to get back home, he has to walk on his own 2 feet.
The text explicitly states that it takes him 2 full days and 1 night of constant agonizing walking to finally limp back to his mother's house.
A nightmare.
And the punchline to his entire character arc is that forever after, he is absolutely terrified of any monk who knocks on his door asking for alms. He was literally, geographically scared straight by a supernatural marathon.
It is the ultimate disproportionate response, but structurally it serves the narrative perfectly.
It really ties it all together.
It punishes the wicked, it provides a massive dose of comic relief, and it definitively demonstrates the overwhelming, unstoppable power of the monk who is now, finally, about to face the true crisis of locating and saving Guotai before sunset.